Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Olsen, and I am the Executive Director of the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable. I am a white woman with medium-length brown hair. I'm wearing clear-rimmed glasses as well as a striped dress. Behind me is a white wall with a piece of wooden art with tiny houses. I am so grateful to be in community with you all today and to be part of our larger arts and education community as we kick off Face2Face 2021. Holy cow, it feels like we were here just a year ago. Truly, it means so much to have you all with us today. And although we are currently meeting via an online platform, the Roundtable would like to acknowledge that we live and work on stolen land. The place that we call New York City exists on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Canarsie, Lenape, Munsee, and Wappinger people. We'd like to give a moment to respect them as well as the Black and immigrant communities which have helped build and continue to help build the city that we know today. As we travel in their footsteps, we recognize that our pasts, presents, and futures are intertwined. Thank you. And I now would like to share a few reminders regarding Zoom and the platform. If you're having trouble with Zoom, please feel free to message a member of the Roundtable staff, myself, Kinsey, or Megan. We all have NYC-AIER in our names. You can also refer to the one sheet that was emailed out, and a link of that will be pasted in the chat momentarily. We encourage you to use the chat box to share resources and connect with other participants. There will be time for a Q&A during this keynote conversation. And so if you have questions for our panelists, please paste them into the Q&A feature. Additionally, any resources shared in the transcript will be saved and shared in a follow-up email in the coming days, along with an event recording. A note that this event is being recorded and will be shared on the Roundtable website at a later date. This call also includes closed captioning as well as ASL interpretation. To activate the closed captioning setting, please click the live transcript button on your toolbar and select Show Subtitles. And with that, I just want to also acknowledge our steering committee members, our conference steering committee members who have worked so hard to help put this conference on. Really, the work of the Roundtable happens within our committees. These are members of our community who volunteer their time to curate events, create new initiatives, and dream up ways that the Roundtable can support our larger arts and education field here in New York City. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge them, give them a round of applause. These are fabulous individuals that work across all 5 boroughs and all artistic disciplines and really were integral in shaping, planning, reimagining Face2Face 2021 this year. So thanks to those folks. And I also wish to express our sincere gratitude to our conference funders and sponsors who helped make Face2Face 2021 possible. A special thank you to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, New York State Council on the Arts, Disney, and the National Dance Institute. So thanks to all of those folks. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce our 2 spoken word artists that are going to kick off our keynote conversation. First, we are going to hear from spoken word artist and educator Sergio Jimenez. Sergio is a spoken word artist and educator who hails from the Bronx. He is an alum and teaching artist with Urban Word NYC. He also teaches for Cooper Union College, City Lore, Dream Yard, as well as many other public and private schools across the country. With a discipline in poetry, performance, and visual arts, Sergio has been featured in theaters such as the Apollo, the Mist, the Snapple Theater, and his teaching has been spotlighted on Telemundo and New York One News. Perfect. And after Sergio, we're then going to hear from poet, writer, and scholar Nathaniel Isiah Swanson. Nathaniel is an artist and youth activist hailing from Brooklyn, New York. Through Urban Word NYC, he was a member of the Youth Leadership Council, the 2018 National Slam Team, a 2017 and 2018 Federal Hall Fellow, and a 2019 Youth Poet Laureate Ambassador. He has performed at venues such as the Apollo, the Shed, Brooklyn Arts Museum, Harlem Stage, the Delacorte Theater, and many more. He has also been featured in videos produced by HBO and NYC Youth, which was nominated for a Weeby Award. And I do wish to say we were introduced to Sergio and Nathaniel through Urban Word NYC. Urban Word NYC champions the voices of New York City youth by providing platforms for critical literacy, youth development, and leadership through free and uncensored writing, college prep, and performance opportunities. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sergio.
Hello, everyone. The poem I will be performing today is entitled, This Poverty. In 2014, my older brother and I hung our pockets on a cliff to fabricate Christmas. Our siblings, unaware of how close Santa was to skipping our house, are unwrapping presents with radiant smiles. My mother, a brave queen with bricks for shoulders, bit her tears back. My older brother, his eyes like stone, glances over at me, a passive smirk. In that glance, we mutually understand. It is time to take mom's bricks onto our own shoulders. We inherited that glance from a poverty that makes you hustle for a dream, claiming the world can be yours if you can afford it. Poverty forces you fast food and not Chipotle, forces you corner store and not Whole Foods, forces your mother to sleep on cold benches with 2 baby boys and broken English. Poverty turns you into circus act on the 5 train, asking suitcases and sunglasses to give us the crumbs of capitalism. Turns your little brother into sticky fingers. Poverty pushes you to hopping trains and stealing honey buns, pushes knives on your neck from homeboys who played on the swings with you, but now have something to prove. Well, now I have something to prove. My mother's shoulders can't be bricks anymore. My brother and I, being our own fathers on Christmas, shouldn't have my mother crying. My stepfather walked out when I just got comfortable calling him Pops. God didn't build these walls to stop me, but to see if I'm willing to climb. I have to make enough money to buy my mom one of those mansions she keeps seeing in novelas. I have to buy my father back from God. I have to tell New York City's capitalism, I told you. Tell my stepfather, I told you. Tell the DOE, I told you. Tell NYCHA, I told you. Tell welfare, I told you. I gotta make it so far the stars are gonna back me up when I approach God and ask him if that's all he's got. Hoping he realizes that's all I can take.
Thank you, Sergio. We'll now hear from Nathaniel Isiah Swanson.
This poem is titled To Believe in Prophecies. As a child, I loved watching Jean Grey wield the powerful Phoenix Force, guardian of the M'Kron crystal. It was in the complete darkness of space, plummeting to her doom, that she found her chrysalis. And when Grey emerged from Jamaica Bay, a creature of utter power, my hatchling eyes supernovaed. The other day, my father found a picture of my younger self holding a phoenix, palms turned upwards, cupping pools of flame to the camera as offering. In hopes it would immortalize the magic of the rising bird, my father found this on the lip of an escape from a slow burn year, full of spread like wildfire, of constant unraveling like Jean. My mind sometimes felt like a raging chorus, or rather a home invasion, or maybe a Tunis. And like Gray, I've hurtled and crashed and survived to see another womb-splitting daybreak been and unbecoming of myself. Sometimes it's like I am two halves, one white-hot, rageful hater of chains descended from feathered birds of light and fire, from black queens, the other, an astral plane projection, insignificant to the tangible world, unmartyred, mere noise to a murderous state. I look at the photo of me holding the phoenix, of me holding myself. I think of iteration, think of how many death-defying days it took to get here, how I still evade death like wind flickers a flame, phoenix, evader of demise, ripe with lifetimes. I look back at the photo and catch a smolder in my eyes. The earliest versions of ourselves are first forgotten, but they are the ignition, the match strike. Child me says here, it is time to reassemble while the world around you combusts. Here, with all of your ember flaws and still burning pain, you will rise fresh, cauterized, whole, ready to soar.
That was incredibly powerful. Thank you again, Sergio and Nathaniel. Ooh, this has me feeling inspired. It has me feeling inspired today. Once again, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Face2Face 2021. The theme is resilience and reinvention. And I just want to say, if you're here and you're doing this freedom work, this abolition work, that we are all in this together. And by us being all in this together, until trans Black women who are living at or below the poverty level get free, ain't none of us free. And with that, it is my distinct honor to introduce to you a dear friend of mine. She really needs no introduction, but I'll give her a brief one anyway. She is the executive director of Vibe Theater Experience and the co-host of one of my favorite web series, Black Women Are Reliable Sources, the one, the only, the untouchable Toya Lillard.
Oh, Darrell, come on, y'all. Face2Face 2021 is hitting different. Just really grateful to be here. Shout out to the steering committee for having the foresight and the good taste to choose our keynote speakers. And it is my pleasure and honor and privilege to be in a position to be able to introduce these two wonderful folks to you. But first, I want to just note the importance of community in terms of my connection or my imagined connection, one real and one imagined, to both of our speakers. I first came to know Suhaly through Black Women Artists for Black Lives Matter, which is a collective that I joined in 2015 and continue to be a part of, and then continuing on with Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute, New York City, in June of 2020, which was an intense training opportunity situation that we both went through and were forever changed by. Yes, ESINYC forever. Kimberly Drew is my yoga friend in my head, because I first encountered her actually in real life space in one of my yoga teachers. Shout out to Amy Cox, because that's just how it is. If you were fortunate enough to be able to take a yoga class with Amy Cox, you might be in a class with Kimberly Drew. And so I'm like, yoga buddy in my head. And so Amy, yes, Amy is the real deal. So it is really, really an honor to be able to speak about two folks who are really important to my life and my work. And as Darrell said, if you're really about this liberation and about this abolitionist work, then you got to get into it, right? Or be into it, remain into it, get deeper. So rather than just read bios, wanted to make those important connections and let us know that this is embodied work, this is embodied practice. We are living it for real. Lastly, come on, y'all. Come on. Either you have it or you don't. What's up? So I will start with, again, that it is my great pleasure to be able to share with you some information and to introduce you to our keynote speakers for Face2Face 2021. Suhaly Bautista-Carolina, she, her, is an educator and community organizer whose work is rooted in the collective wisdom and power of community. Born in New York City on Lenape land to Afro-Dominican parents, Suhaly's work, which lives intentionally at the intersection of justice, equity, and the arts, has been executed through her roles at the Caribbean Cultural Center, African Diaspora Institute, Creative Time, and the Brooklyn Museum, and in various capacities with organizations including the Laundromat Project, Art Built, Brooklyn Children's Museum, among others. Her work has been published in the New York Times, Oprah Magazine, La Galeria Magazine, Remezcla, United Nations International Museum of Women, and Caribbean Vistas Journal. She is a 2016 alumna of CCCADI's Innovative Cultural Advocacy Fellowship and a graduate of Columbia University's Summer Teachers and Scholars Institute, The Many Worlds of Black New York. In 2017, Suhaly curated Black Art Story Month, a project of the Myrtle Avenue Brooklyn Partnership, bringing exhibitions, murals, performances, film screenings, and more to Brooklyn's Fort Greene and Clinton Hill neighborhoods. She also curated the exhibition Laquais at the Haitian-centric community organization Diaspora Community Services in partnership with Art Connects New York, ACNY. Suhaly has been a panelist at conferences and festivals across the country, including Art Changes Us, Art Prize 7, Open Engagement, POW Arts, Professional Organization for Women in the Arts, Regions, and the New York City Spiritual Herbalism Conference. Suhaly is a Weeksville Heritage Center ambassador and serves on the advisory boards to Black Girl Project and More Art. She's a founding member of the arts collective Present Futures, a member of Black Women Artists for Black Lives Matter, and founder of Black Magic Afrofuturism Book Club. She earned her BA and MPA from NYU, where she was named one of NYU's 15 most influential students. In 2019, Suhaly joined the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Education Department as Senior Managing Educator of Audience Development and Engagement. She is living in Brooklyn with her family and developing her spiritual herbalism practice, Moon Mother Apothecary. All right, give it up, give it up. Kimberly Drew is an author, activist, and cultural curator. Inspired by Toni Morrison's The Black Book, Drew is the editor of an anthology with Jenna Wortham titled Black Futures, which examines how creativity relates to Black cultural identity in the age of social media. Additionally, she is author of This Is What I Know About Art, part of the Pocket Change Collective series. And without further ado, it is my great pleasure to now introduce you to our keynote speakers, Suhaly Bautista-Carolina, and Kimberly Drew. Thank you.
We did it, Joe.
We did it, Joe.
Hello, everyone digitally. Thank you all for being here with us. I'm going to just kick us off with a self-description. I am a Black person. I am wearing a black telfar do-rag and wearing dangly earrings, some gold jewelry, and a very dingy tank top. I'm in front of a white wall.
And you look beautiful, by the way.
Just for you, baby.
Hi everyone, I'm Suhaly. I'm wearing a burnt orange blouse dress situation. I have a plant behind me. I have curly hair. I am a light-skinned Black person, and I'm wearing a furry teal hat.
You didn't mention that the hat is Kimberly's because I need that hat now.
There you go. It just transferred owners.
There's so many things to say to start, but I just want, I think, first to start with so much gratitude for this opportunity, for this space, for this incredible incantation. The spoken word was so beautiful. Those introductions were so generous. We were sidebarring about Amy Cox, who has just truly changed both of our lives in such significant ways. But maybe we can also start in talking about our song choice. Do you want to, because you really did it, and then we were both just like synced up and we're like, this is what the song has to be. But do you want to kick off with the why or the how?
Of course, yes. I'm actually really grateful that we were offered the selection, which I think is really beautiful. And I don't know, it took me down a rabbit hole. I was like, what song? I don't know. Oh my goodness, one song of all songs of all time. This is impossible. And then Kimberly and I were connecting, and actually my wife recommended, what about Who We Be? Because I think she was thinking about both of us, you and me, and just our history, our careers in the field, in arts and culture, in New York City landscape, and just both as personal, you know, who we are, who we be in these spaces, and also what it means to be inside institutions and be part of communities that maybe are not understood or seen in institutions. I'm going right there, huh? I think that this song is just such a magical reflection of all the things that we are, right? DMX is just like, this is all the things, right? I'm like this accordion folder of human experience. And it just felt so important also to honor DMX in this moment, right? He was such a part of like our culture, our history, our upbringing. I can't tell you how many times I was like, but I want to be a Rough Rider. Like that's that's what I wanted to be when I was in the 8th grade, a Rough Rider. So yeah, it felt important to acknowledge this artist and what DMX is going through in this moment, to see him as an artist, to see him as a contributor to like culture, and to also think through the lyrics a little bit and how they relate to our stories, our careers, our histories. What did you think about the song choice? Like, what did you think about the song? What sticks out? What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, no, I loved it. I was thinking so much about our story, which really started, which you may not know, like in 2013, because at that time you had applied to work at the Studio Museum. And that's when I first learned who you were. And then we wouldn't meet again, or we wouldn't meet properly, I think, for another few years. And it's literally like this exact manifestation of they don't know who we be. Like I didn't know in reading what was your application that you would be a person that I needed to have in my life. And is that not the perfect way to think about a conversation about art and access? You know, there's so many ways that we work in these structures. And especially too, back in 2013, I didn't have the cohort that I have now. I think I speak for many people who feel so isolated in the arts. You feel that there may not be other people like you in spaces, or we interact with audiences who automatically assume that everyone who's working in these institutions is not going to be like them, much less want to receive them. And I love that song as this kind of reminder of not just what is unknown, but what is really known. You know, it's like the pain, like So the listing that happens throughout the song, this unearthing of the truth, is something that feels like such a bad thing to do for us too as culture workers, right? What would it mean to be honest, right? To say, oh, I've had a bad day, or to say, you know, I need 15 minutes. I actually can't go to this meeting. And so I appreciate so much DMX as a cultural figure. I think about, you know, you were talking about him, and I thought so much about Frederick Douglass, which is how my brain works. Because Frederick Douglass is noted as the most photographed man in the 20th century. That's just a fact, like, of any walk of life. Like, he understood the power of the image. And Sarah Lewis writes so brilliantly about this as part of her Vision and Justice project. And I think about Jonathan Mannion's images of DMX and how powerful they were. Like, Jonathan Mannion is kind of a trash bag, I will say that. But those images were really so prescriptive of what adulthood looks like, especially, you know, as young Black people. Like, we were moving towards what we hoped were grand aspirations, and they were made manifest through those images. And so it's so interesting also because I can't believe I'm not an adult with like 2 paw prints a la Eve, like true Rough Rider energy, you know? And instead I find myself as a cultural critic and arts writer that's so far off, you know? But then of course, those images sit beside us and don't leave us. And we don't have to divorce ourselves from DMX to be able to be in this space. And so it feels like such a powerful conversation with even our younger selves that we felt like maybe couldn't be with us.
That's right. Yeah, that's so right. I love the permanence, the imprint, you know, the imprint and sort of the observation and the acknowledgement of what stuck with us, right? How much art actually stuck with us, and who gets to decide what that is such a complicated thing, because if you would have asked me maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, how was art a part of my life, maybe I would have said no then, you know. And now I'm just like, no, it was in everything that I did. It was everywhere I went. It was in the back of my mom's Oldsmobile with like all the music that I know by heart that you could like ask me what the next track is, and I can tell you all that. And I love that there's a line in his song, and I think one of the last lines is like, the dark, the light, the heart, the fight. And that's like one of the last lines. And I'm like, we can hold truths that are dark and light, and that's such a part of how we are creative humans in this world. And there's so much fight also, you know. Fight really sticks out to me because I'm like, there's so much struggle, there's so much the theme is resilience, and I know we're going to get there, but there's so much fight, you know, at every corner. And I wish almost for my childhood self, like, to heal part of her, to tell her like, everything, you're good, you're in it, you know, it's all around you, just to heal that part of me that didn't think that I had access to that, when really art with a capital A was not the only art and culture that was part of my world. You know, I had something richer, I had something truer, I had something that was in my DNA, you know. I love that he brings that to life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's incredible even to think, and then we'll pivot to the conversation on resiliency, but I think so much about design and architecture in that way, and especially as New Yorkers. Like, there's something about being on this land and sitting in these stunning, like, either atrocities or like historical, and this happens everywhere, but I've only lived here. But even if you don't remark on every awning, on every doorknob, on every pathway, it still holds you. Mm-hmm. You know, like, we are actually in so many ways held by art forms. And if we don't stop to appreciate that, like, then what are we doing? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a longer conversation about architecture, a longer conversation about city planning. All of those things are acknowledged. But every day, I think so much about what it means to, especially in this moment where we're relegated to our homes in certain ways. And there is a profound safety that we are seeking, and not all of us are afforded in our domestic spaces. I just am thinking so much about the ever-presence of design and the ever-presence of art, and how it doesn't have to be relegated to spaces beyond us. And it doesn't have to be so deeply invested and entrenched in a choreography of interaction, right? Like, that was always my beef with museums, like always will be my beef with museums, is that we should be able to go into museums and lay. We should be able to go into museums and sit. We should be able to go into museums and speak in whatever tongue feels best to us. And we should be heard. We should be seen. We should be witnessed. We should be held. And as museum workers, we should understand that we might cause violence to our audiences. We just have to hold those truths. Or then what's the point, you know? Because the salaries ain't good enough to say that.
Kimberly. Yeah, I mean, we're the energy, right? We're the life force. We're the ashe in the room. We activate the space. So without the public, you know, it's just a room full of things.
Chair is just a chair if no one is sitting there. Luther Vandross.
It makes me, I wrote this essay, I think last year, actually. Not many people have heard it, but I had to deliver it as a TED Talk as part of like an assignment. And it was about how I pretty much hated museums as a young person because, you know, like New York City kids, every time we get on the school bus and we going somewhere, like, it's a party. You know, we got the headphones, we're leaving the building for the first time. Yeah, what's the new? Everybody's coming out of their hush puppies to do like the Usher My Way dance. It was like a vibe. And I just remember so much joy on the bus and like on the way. And then it was like, shh, no more, like silence. And then moving through these spaces, like, just the way that such a magnificent place was policed, how we were policed in such a magnificent space, and how much more we would have gotten out of that experience if we had been allowed to like overtake the halls with all of that joy and all of that energy. Yeah, you know, because you've toured me and Luna through the spaces, and you know, it's hard to get her not to touch things. She's a small one, but I want her to feel joy in this space. I want her to feel connection. I want her to feel appreciation and value, and to be able to express that in the way that is instinctive to her, you know? But it makes me think about that. It makes me think about how long it took me to come back to love museums, and even then to work with young people and like model what it means for them to be your full self in these spaces, which is usually, you know, not allowed.
I think this is the perfect time to talk about the title for today's keynote. And I know that you had pulled up the definition of resilience. If you want to share that with the group.
Absolutely. Yes. So Kimberly and I have been talking about resilience, and there is this is the definition that we came up with, or that is online actually: the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. And I actually was reading a little bit about resilience, and a quote came up in the news site for Australian HR Institute that says, instead of trying to train each and every individual in resilience so that as many people recover from adversity, organizations should be looking at how they can structure cultures, policies, and behaviors to help everyone thrive when adversity comes. We shouldn't help people beat the odds. We should change the odds. Period.
Punto.
That really spoke to me. I think My hairs are standing up. Se me paran los pelos, we say in Spanish. Because it reminds me of this conversation. You and I were talking about this, Kimberly, about accessibility and about changing the conditions of our world so that not more, but all people can enter into it, versus trying to fit people into a world that cannot hold us, that doesn't hold us appropriately. And that's what this makes me think about, is what is the point to return to in resilience? I'm such a visual learner. I'm like, there is a circle, right? What we are encouraging and sometimes romanticizing, I fear, is the return to the place where something hard happens and the strength that it takes to rise back up from that starting point, from that nexus, right? And I keep interrogating the need to glamorize resilience, right? I think that a certain level of strength is necessary, but I think that an over-dependence on resilience is also an over-dependence on the conditions that make resilience necessary. So that quote really inspired that thinking for me. I don't know what it brought up for you. What did you think when you heard that?
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing you talk about it. For me, it makes me think so much about the first time that I saw a public art form project, and I had to personally check myself because I think I want to say it was like a Donvo, there was this Donvo piece that was these deconstructed bronzen pieces of Lady Liberty. And it was so gorgeous that I felt that I couldn't touch it. Like I was raised in many households, across households, that there were rooms you could not go in. Like couches covered in plastic, okay? Like you were not sitting on it. And I remember being guided through that space and watching children play with art. And I was just like, whoa, like I still to this day am like constantly checking myself, or watching, people of, all ages just like interacting with the art in the real way. But it's one of those things that is really changing the odds and changing the opportunity for connection. So I love someone like Sir David Adjaye's work so much, and thinking about what does it mean to take something like public housing and make it beautiful? Mm-hmm. Like we have to change the odds. We have to change the field, or there's no conversation about equality. Like we have to get to equity, and then maybe we can talk about equality,
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love your comparison. Yeah, about the piece, just like about the artwork that's being created now. I think about Naima Green's work too, about Jewels in the Hinterland and the Pursuit Deck, and just like artists' ability to just take something and be like, actually, let's look at it from this side of the table, where everything changes, where there can be beauty, where there always has been, and just if you look at it from this side, well, then maybe you're not seeing that, but turn around and maybe you see the big picture. And I love that flipping the scenario on its head, to be able to see the truth, to see a reality, right? That feels authentic to me. And then you feel seen. I think there's so many artists who I love, who are our friends, right? Who help put our stories in the archive, I know we both love talking about the future and futurity, but there's a conversation that's seated when we're able to see from the starting point of our reality, that allows for us to imagine a path from there, and I really always just appreciate that so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes me think so much about, going into this conversation, we had kind of two different conversations about how to arrive in this space in the most generative way, because we're obviously in some ways speaking to people who we at least have a shared set of assumptions about each other. But one of the things that I find always to be important in this work is that with hope, we have the opportunity to begin again, to make anew. With each new exhibition, with each new program, I hope that there is an opportunity for all of us to understand our unique power in being able to not only care for ourselves, but for the communities to which we are a part of, are an ambassador for, are liaising with, are creating space for, are cleaning up after. You know, those things feel really important to say, because this year, of course, is a year of so many of our colleagues being let go.
That's right.
And so many ways that educators are being taught that they are dispensable. And it is so disheartening. As a person who in many ways is not like a hands-on educator, but like a digital educator. And also just a person who has a very strange ego. I'm like, how the heck do you think you're gonna get people to come to this old dusty, busty, and crusty place if there are not liaisons and interpreters to not just like teach, but also to learn from them? Like, how does a museum not die without educators?
The essential workers. You're such
Period.
a leader, by the way. I hope you
I claim and I hold it, but I'm gonna do it on a laptop. I'm gonna keep it funky with you. When I was at Smith College, I worked at the Smith College Museum as a student museum educator. We called it SME. And let me tell you, the trainings, I was like, I'm out. Because if someone challenges me, we're fighting. But, you know, I've been trained as an educator. I still am an educator. But I definitely know that there's certain ways that I'm just like, I'm gonna let the professionals handle it.
That makes me think about the role of the expert in museums and that whole conversation about who knows what is most valued as knowledge, who are the knowledge holders, and why can't that be me? Why can't that be me? Bell Hooks wrote this wonderful essay, now I'm forgetting the name of it, where she talks about experiential wisdom and the value of experiential wisdom. I know you're looking for it over there, Kimberly, because you are the best researcher of all time. But it was really important for me to read as I was entering into the field of arts education, to just remember what I knew and to stand in that power, to see that as power, and to have to advocate most of the time, right? For that wisdom that is in me, that inherited, passed down knowledge, everything that I picked up on like 107th Street in Harlem, everything that I picked up along the way from my parents, from my community, all that I know that had value in this place, that had value in this field. And I don't know if there's a place that you land where you feel solidified in that truth, you know, but I'm talking to, it's like, I want to stand on my soapbox and be like, our educators, your reality, your truth, your wisdom, your experience is the knowledge, right? Is the power. That's what's going to change or open up a member of the public's eyes, as to help them see themselves in the work, help them see their realities as valid, as beautiful, as joyful, as full, as enough. That has happened to me in like these small and very, very, very important ways throughout my career. And they always like stand out to me and remind me of like how little I turned to the books. I don't want to call myself like, I'm not a scholar, I'm not anti-scholarly, but most of what I know is lived experience, is my life, is my people, right? Is what I'm living in, what I'm turning to each day.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a way to be studied that isn't, I mean, it's so funny when like these words are stolen from us, right? Like, you are scholarly, you know, like I trust you with the things I put in my body. Like, there's no one else that's really, I mean, it's like you, Marissa, I'm like taking, because Suhaly's also an herbalist. Like, I trust you with my organs. So I do believe you to be a scholar. But yeah, I wanted to also just mention too quickly, one of my former colleagues at the Met, who I just want to bring into the space. His name is David Barney. And for the 3 years that I worked at the Met, I saw him every single day. And every single day he stood in the Greek and Roman galleries as a guard. And what Dave knew about those pieces, none of us knew. And when I left the Met, he passed away in that period. And losing him is just such like there's such this mourning, right? And we have to acknowledge and hold and bring these people with us along, you know? But I think so much about that. I think so much about how we can understand and empower each other, and how not only Dave's knowledge about those works, the knowledge that he held about 20 years or 37 years of being at that institution, having a heart attack in the fucking museum, excuse me. And that knowledge is so valuable. Like, we all have to understand, like, there's so much more to know and to regard in ourselves that we can't make assumptions about each other. Like, that's my favorite thing about the work of educators, as opposed to like security guards who know just as much, but also have to keep everything safe. So there's like a different kind of negotiation. You're like, did that person move weird? But we have to continue to privilege those things. You know, like Dave is one of the few people, and you know, Suhaly, because you work at the Met, who said hello. Like, people don't say hi. Like, you worked there for like 10 years and people don't even say hi to you. And that emotional intelligence is so valuable.
Yes.
And so I appreciate you raising that, because it's just that when I think about the Met, I think of Dave. I don't think about half of those people. You know, I just think about all the things that he knew. And I think about all the things that I learned, especially from, like, we were talking about Marie and Rebecca earlier, but like the access team at the Met, those folks who are doing the Lord's work at that institution. And so I mean, I think for both of us, it was just so important to just take a pause also to celebrate the work in a moment where it's being devalued and discredited, because it is so essential and it looks many different ways. And I feel like if there's anything that y'all take away from this, is to just understand that, because there's just not enough conversations about it, period. Like, it makes me so angry. Sorry. I always get just like, it's so hard to be an educator. That's why I joke about it. I'm like, yo, I was in college trying to learn it. I was like, I can't do this. And then I found myself as a more adult figure. And then to hear the disrespect, I'm still mad. I'm freshly mad.
Yeah, it should make you mad. It's frustrating. Thank you for sharing your story about Dave. I didn't know Dave, but that's so beautiful and so true. So true. And it reminds me of like, I probably talk about love more than anybody in my like office or field. Not field, certainly, 'cause I know a lot of folks here talk about love and radical love and art, but we really mean it. Like, I mean, Kimberly means it. I think that sometimes the words on paper, they, the translation of the work in action, like in your body, the way that you show up in love, with heart at the center of what you do, it changes everything. I think for you to see Dave and for Dave to see you is like, that's what allows anything to happen from that starting point, right? For you to care, for you to be invested in Dave, for you to know each other's names, for you to say hello, that's appreciation of life. That's just you seeing each other. And that sometimes is I see that as absent in a lot of the spaces that I move through. And sometimes I think we're so skilled in picking up on the language that's necessary to communicate that you have heart or that you move with heart, but it really shows in the smallest, the minute details of how you move in your day-to-day, in how you react to how you interact with your colleagues, how you respond, your openness to things that Kimberly, you're hitting that note right there, right? Your ability to like see possibility beyond what you thought was the truth, right? Or a truth, is such a skill. It's such a skill that gets little love and that needs more attention, because that is such an expertise that arts educators around us have, that is undervalued. And I think needs to be like super respected, especially now that I think institutions are claiming to want to be different, claiming to want to move in a different direction. And so if that requires so much, Kimberly's drinking water when I said that, that requires so much of what we've been doing forever. And if that is not centered and seriously in the middle, that's not gonna happen. Equity requires love, access requires love, futurity requires love, joy requires love. All of those things have to be real, like, and valued and respected and acknowledged and appreciated and well-resourced, right? Like, I don't wanna forget the dollars. Like, for us to move forward in our work, we need support of many different varieties, right? So, yeah, I mean, we could go down many different arenas.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm thinking so much too, like, I've had so much reckoning having worked in and out of institutions. I worked at Creative Time, which is a public art institution. I worked at, which is so funny because I was so triggered at Public Art Fund, and then I was like, I'll run straight to the source. I've worked at private art galleries. I worked at the Met, obviously. And I've had so much reckoning and thinking about also like the inherent violence in so many art spaces, like the colonial histories. What does it mean for the British Museum to tweet Black Lives Matter, or, the Met Museum to have the gall and audacity to write an open letter about how Black Lives matter to them? And also have to set like, okay, am I inviting other people into a space that is violent? But I appreciate where we started the conversation, because there is so much of it that is ours, and not in like a, Wakandan artifact way, but that we should be able to experience some of the finest things, whether that's a community garden. Like, I think so much, I want to just bring Kemi into the space, Kemi Osami and Laundromat Project, like whether it's at your doorstep or all the way in the fanciest part of your town, that should be an option for you. That should be a choice that you make. And it shouldn't require all of the prep and anticipation of resiliency. Like, taking in art should not be a project of resilience.
Yes, Ashe. I'm applaud to that. And that reminds me of, you're bringing in Kemi, and Kemi is a hero, right? A Shiro. Linda Goodbryant is my other Shiro in my mind. I'm just like, what do you, to the fact that she had a conversation with David Hammonds, and David Hammonds was like, I'm not showing at these spaces. And she's like, cool, yeah, I'll make the space where you can show. That's brilliant. And just moving from a place of where you know what the needs of your community are, being so in touch with the need that when you see the absence, you can create the thing, is like, I want to take that and bottle that and drink that every day. Like, what is the absence in my community? What is the need? And there's so many artists also. Shout out to, socially engaged artists who are identifying the gap and being like, what needs to happen so that my community is good, so my people are good. And art is never absent from that conversation. Art is always a part of that discussion. And I just think that's such a beautiful, those visionaries had such, the way that they move. I mean, and we see them in the present day. They're not all in our history, they're in our present, as you're acknowledging.
And they're building the future too. Like, I think so much about Zenobia Bailey, who is just like iconic. And I'm like, Zenobia Bailey is like on the weekends making art literally from, like, I don't want to say trash, but recycled materials.
Yeah. And
then also is installing massive work with MTA Arts for Transit, is at, the Museum of Art and Design. And it's just the homie too, it's so incredible to think about our artists and so many cultural figures who are helping to lower these barriers to access, because that's the work. Mm-hmm. That is the greatest, I think, privilege of what it means to do the work that we do. Mm-hmm. Like the ability to make it available to others, I think, is the biggest responsibility that I take on every day. And then second, it's cute because we're all family in one way or another. But first and foremost, it's that responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I like to think of these things as responsibilities as opposed to privileges, but I also acknowledge the privilege too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about privilege when we were having a conversation about resilience too, just to bring it back to resilience and strength and toughness, and thinking about privilege in that conversation, and seeing sometimes that the success that sometimes we attribute to resilience oftentimes is not interrogated through the lens of privilege, right? That we see success and we say, wow, that person must have had, that person overcame something difficult and now they're here, or they achieved XYZ. And sometimes not thinking about what made it so that they could survive that adversity, right? Is there something in their conditions, again, going back to conditions, that made it possible or easier, facilitated their ability to reach success, whatever that looks like. And which also makes me think about when we stay too long, when we're too resilient, right? Because that can backfire. There's so much strength, or you think that you're supposed to stay because you want to be the strong one, or because that's what you're supposed to do in order to be resilient, and you're chasing that so much that sometimes you overstay in the pain, in the hurt, in the trauma, in the traumatic experience, in the violent institution, and you hurt yourself in this quest to be resilient, And I think, yes, Black women especially, I read one comment in the chat. I'm like very proud of myself. But the chat is live. Thank y'all for being with us. Because
I mean, I think so much about like Kelly Morgan in Indianapolis. Like, that's wild. That's wild, And so many of us, like, we've had, like, in our relationship, we've had so many incredible eye-opening moments. Mm-hmm. But when you checked in with me, like, at some point in your net time, and you were like, how did you do it here? Mm. Like, those things are so valuable in the way that we check in on each other. Mm. because there's so much resource available. There's so much privilege attached to all these things. But there is also a level of like, how do we care for each other? How do we give each other these tools? You know, it's like when you were applying to work there, it's like I felt so responsible over your safety there. You know, like I was so happy that Jerry was there to be with you, but like that's not enough, you know? It's baffling to me sometimes. I think about my early parts of my career too, like when I started Black Contemporary Art back in 2011, which is this Tumblr page that I did that was a resource for learning about Black artists. Like I worked so hard on that, and not because it was hard, but because it was like so much work to do, because I didn't have access to other online resources to find Black artists. And I don't regret a minute of the work because I did it because I knew I didn't want anyone else to have to work that hard.
That's right. Yeah, it's a trail, right? It's a trail every time. And I'm so grateful that in 2021, I have like my people, right? That I can be like, but how? But when? But what do you say when someone says this, like, help me with this, read this email for me. Is this, you know, the fact that we're still here because we're fighting many fights, right? I think we talk about, you and I specifically have talked about being in specific places as like war, like a certain level of like armor that you need to put on in order to navigate these spaces on a day-to-day basis. And that's not including the fights, the different battles that you're fighting, right? Because there's so many of them. And at the same time, you're doing this work that you're talking about, Kimberly, which is like looking this way to make sure that you left enough of a trail that someone could experience safety in the institution and still be focused on their goal, our shared goal. Like,
honey, don't even get me started. Like, I love also, nothing gives me greater joy. And this will not sound great, but follow me. Like diversity initiatives in institutions where they're like, we're gonna top to bottom, make it more diverse. I was like, I'm not doing that with y'all. I'm not going to join that panel. Like, I'm gonna go and spend my weekends talking to young people directly. Don't get me wrong. Like, I will destroy a pipeline, honey, if I'm gonna do one thing. But I'm not spending my quality work time with y'all, making y'all feel better.
Yeah,
I have a job to do. Like, I was hired to turn that light bulb. I'm gonna turn that light bulb, and in my free time, I will, you know, talk to anyone who will listen.
Yes. Job versus purpose.
Because that's the thing too, is it's like, yeah, it's like this resiliency conversation is also, it's like, how much do we have to do? How much care work, how much emotional labor, how much, like, it's a big, like, tax on us. And, you know, even thinking about when we were talking earlier, we're like, oh, should we change the name from feeding resilience to building resilience to, and I feel like it's just like acknowledging resilience, like sitting in reverence of resilience, and reverence as both respect, but also fear. Like, I don't want to be this resilient anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to, in my work, in my programs, in my initiatives, create the expectations that you must be in order for you to be successful. That I create frames that will only hold you if you know how to get out of adversity, or that, you know, that replicate that. I don't want to do that either as an arts educator. It's like, return to trauma. Can you get out of it? Return to trauma. It's like, I don't want to play that song on repeat. We're all sick of that song. So what can we do, you know, as we create from here that imagines, you know, a truth that doesn't return to that place, you know, acknowledging that strength is required, but, you know, what else? What more? Yeah.
I also think about strength too, like in my truest version of myself, I understand that the strongest, most powerful that I am ever at any point in the day is when I'm at my most vulnerable. And I think in the arts, we also have to move towards a space of understanding that also as a powerful space to be in. It's not about being the aggressive. It's not about being the loudest. It's not about being the most knowledgeable. If you can bring your whole self and survive it, that's kind of dope. So how can we facilitate space where all of us can do that? And also understand that we, by nature of being together, will also refute that opportunity for each other, you know? But still, every day we show up again and again and again and again and try. Like, that's the space I want to be in.
Yes. Same. +1.
Party at Suhaly.
Oh, that's so great. I wonder now if we're going to start taking questions. I know we're at 5:10. So we get an opportunity to continue to talk. Hi, Toya.
Hi. So that's my cue with my wonderful co-MC Darrell. Hi, y'all. So first of all, let's give it up for this talk, this chat, this healing, this anointing, this calling in. Want to lift up this idea for those of us in the room for whom it resonated, this idea of resilience. Stay whole. How do we stay whole and work towards liberation that involves us all being whole rather than broken, right? So now is the time for the Q&A. Really deeply appreciative of the chat. While we get to the Q&A, y'all look at the chat. The first question I love because I'm shallow. I know this isn't about the conversation, but Gemini, you got to be a Gemini. But I would like to know this. Suhaly, where did you get your Ankh? I bought the one I had in Atlanta years ago and wore it for years until I lost it in 2019. I haven't been able to find another one. Tell me you don't have Gemini placements. What's up? Where'd you get the Ankh?
You are going to be floored by this answer. I got in Egypt, actually.
Yeah. Not in Atlanta.
Not in Atlanta.
As one does.
No.
It's either one or the other.
I mean, the synergy.
Yeah. I mean, when travel is a thing again, which I hope it comes back soon, that's the place. Thank you for that question.
Darrell, you want to handle the second question?
I would absolutely love to. Can you share a joyful moment when you had an experience or created a moment in a museum that disrupted and I apologize in advance to the interpreter here, that disrupted the crusty, dusty institutional expectation of learning about art? And they didn't address that to anyone specifically, so I guess it can go to both panelists.
I mean, I personally love to be loud in museums. I know it is really not fun for everyone else involved, but I recently went to see the Lorraine O'Grady show at the Brooklyn Museum, and I've had that work in my life for a decade, and I was stomping. I was just like, I walked around the museum and I was just like, you know, just so gleeful to see not only new work from Lorraine, but also to, you know, Lorraine also as a, you know, educator, an archivist, so committed to being remembered and the remembering of others. Like, I was hooting and hollering in that museum. And so that for me is always a space of joy. And then I guess creating spaces of joy, I've curated a lot of like Instagram group meetups at my time at the Met. I, you know, took Suhaly and her baby Luna on an empty Met tour in the morning. But I love that too, because then we could be as loud as we want before the museum opened. But I love breaking the rules in museums. There's nothing that gets me more excited.
That's why we love you so much. You give us another way.
Yeah, it reminds me of when Black Women Artists for Black Lives Matter, we did the piece at Brooklyn Museum, and we gotten permission to rehearse, and it was a big deal. And so we had this all supposed space held for us to rehearse. And we thought that these white people liked what we were doing because we were rehearsing and they came and they were taking pictures, right? We're like, oh, see, they made this kerfluffle about us being here, and look, the nice white people, they love us. And little did we know, right after they took the pictures, they went and complained to security that we were disrupting their experience. All right, next question. Okay, thank you very much to you all. For white folks who teach in the hood, what are your top pieces of advice? You can do with that what you want.
I'm not white, and I don't know where you are, but if you want to reframe that question in a way that's more specific, perhaps we can provide helpful feedback.
Yeah, I would agree. Reframing that question is really, and asking yourself a couple of questions as you reframe the question too, might be helpful. But yeah, moving on. Darrell, you want to handle the next one?
Yes. If you could imagine arts institution policies and practice as a love language to people's lived experiences, what would those be?
A cookbook, a playlist. I don't know, so many things. A gathering, a big dinner. Yeah, Laura Reikovich, who's another Shiro, has partnered with Brooklyn Public Library and Hyperallergic to organize a series of conversations all throughout the month of April. And the signups are still alive. So this is a definite invitation to be part of a conversation. And the project is called Art and Society Census. So if you don't know it, please Google it. And I'm actually facilitating the conversations around where art and life meet every Tuesday in April. So join me. That's a 90-minute session to reimagine what do we need from our art institutions? What could that look like? Where does art show up and culture show up in our everyday lives? And how can we sort of weave that into what is happening at our institutions, or build new institutions that can hold that? Or what is it that we need to do, And in June, all of that feedback will be shared with the incoming electeds across the city who are thinking about arts and culture, and hopefully will have an ear to what the people say. So this is open to everyone. It's free. There are different topics. The one I'm leading is art and life, but there are other topics that you can engage with. And so that's an invitation to be part of the conversation on what you think that should look like.
I'm moved by this love language to people's lived experiences, and wanted to hold space for you, particularly Suhaly, to talk about healing. As an organization in the Roundtable, we have been ever committed to holding ongoing space for healing justice, creating and developing healing praxis, and understanding how healing is important and tantamount to this conversation.
Yeah, I feel that my herbalism practice keeps me steady. Like, this is what allows me to be in an otherwise really violent, sometimes landscape, right? Is this not separate practice, but this additional practice of holding others, of holding myself, of grounding, of connection to nature, of connection to where we are, who we are, of offering, of continuous offering and abundance, of pouring back into myself. All of these lessons that I think are part of my study, my continuous study, are the ways that I can engage in all spaces, right? The way that I engage with clients, or the ways that I help my friends, support my friends like Kimberly and others in their own needs to remain whole, right? To be able to have better sleep, to be able to have better digestion, to be able to acknowledge and pour back into their own bodies and spirits is the same. There's nothing divorced about my practices anymore. I think I used to try to be like, all right, I'm Moon Mother, and then I'm Suhaly in the art world. And then I was like, that doesn't actually make sense because they're one and the same. I'm being myself in every space. And that's so important for me to stay true, to stay whole, to stay in this practice. And then shout out to the Roundtable because I saw that there's a Black women retreat coming up. Toya, I know you're behind that for Black women in the arts. So who's doing the plug? Because I think that's—
Come on now. Shout out to the Black Women's Wellness Retreat. Get into it. Shout out to the Roundtable for taking the journey and helping to realize the vision. This is about giving Black women in the arts and cultural sector their flowers now, to again hold space for healing, to hold space for us to come together. There is space being held for elders, so please nominate an elder. What's an elder? Someone 55 and above. And we're looking to center Black women who are working in the arts and cultural sector because we know that those are the folks who have fueled this field. So we want to repair some harm and also look towards the future with this idea that we deserve. We deserve space to go away for a retreat. We deserve to restore. So please visit the website. Applications are open until April 14th. We've got some special guests. Darrell, who are the special guests who are going to be joining us at the Black Women's Wellness Retreat? It's real because they signed the contract. Talk about it. Talk about it.
I mean, besides yourself, Toya, because you are very special and you will be there. We just signed contracts with Dr. Yolanda Silly Ruiz. She'll be there to do a poetry workshop. And we also have the one and only Jessica Care Moore, who will be attending the retreat live and in person. And she's going to MC an open mic night. So it's going to be a dope experience. Register, nominate an elder, and I won't be there, but it'll be documented. So I hope you all have a great time, and you've deserved it. So
shout out to Darrell Cooper for all the hard work, and the other folks who have centered this retreat who won't even be able to go. That all the people who are part of the working group and who have steered this effort. Thank you. And thank you for allowing us the space to shout out the event, because it really is, it's related. So I want to get back to the questions. There's one about anti-Blackness, right? So basically, how do each of you handle it when it shows up in your lives? We know living at the intersections that anti-Blackness shows up in a number of layered ways. So how do you handle it nowadays in the panini?
I am pretty zero tolerance, but I also say that as a freelancer, so I don't have the same, I don't have long-term relationships with anyone that is exhibiting these behaviors anymore, or I'm not aware of it in the same way. But I will say in my experience, from the time that I was a wee baby up until now, I've just found those moments and really thought to myself, who am I going home to? Who am I going home to? And what will happen once I get there? And I've had very abusive bosses in my career, and I do not talk about it. But I have almost always done my best to make sure that I advocated for myself, not to control or change their behavior, but because I knew I would go home to myself, and I wouldn't be able to sit with myself if I hadn't said something. And I prefer email sometimes, but it depends, because sometimes you don't want a paper trail. So phone call's good.
Talk about it. And how we respond now in the panini may be different than how we responded before, right? And let's hold space for that.
Yeah.
Darrell, you want
But it's interesting because there's these studies that are going around now that are saying that there's actually an increase of harassment because of remote workspace, which is really interesting to think about. But people, Twitter fingers, that's what the lingo is. It's like, it's really easy to think of all of the people in our respective boxes as avatars and to completely disregard our bodies, our hearts, our minds, our experiences when you're not in a physical space with each other. And so it's so important and valuable to, I always am just like, what can I do for myself? Yeah. I don't need to change y'all. That's not my job. Like, it would be great if you changed. But I know for me to stay here, to keep earning this paycheck, to take care of myself and my family, I'm going to do the best I can with the resources that I have. And at the very least, I'm going to say, please don't do this. Or instead of doing it this way, maybe consider doing it that way. Because it doesn't have to be much bigger than that. And you aren't a failure if you don't do more than that. But I think setting boundaries is the most incredible form of self-love that you can exercise in a professional environment.
Yeah, you choose how you engage, you choose how you disengage. If it is required for you to stay whole to disengage, that's the best choice. I couldn't agree more with everything that Kimberly laid down.
It looks like the person who wrote the question earlier sent in a correction. So maybe I'll go there instead of like the other question that's there since they wrote back. So this comes from, Simon. For white folks who teach in the hood and the rest of y'all too is a famous book written for teachers who wish to change the broken system. I think Simon is referring to, well, I know Dr. Christopher Enden's book. And my question, I meant to ask, what are your own suggestions pertaining to teachers who wish to dismantle the system?
Mm-hmm. Dismantling systems. I'm like, I'm tired. I'm already tired reading that. I just feel like I need to decide where I'm putting my energy. Is it into destruction or is it into building? And that's my question forever. It's like, am I going to expend my energy clawing at something that took this long to build and is like structured and held and supported? It's good, it's solid, right? We know that. Or am I going to model what it means to be different in the world and not absorb the responsibility of having to change the entire thing, but to affect change where you are sitting? Where are you sitting? Where can you affect change? On your block? Cool, let's tackle that. In your cool. In your building? Okay, tackle that. Not in your household with your partner? We have to start at the most local level of change. Right? Sometimes I think we were like, change the whole thing. It's all broken. And I had to do that. I'm still doing that work with myself. Like it's a automatic sort of like response for anyone who's invested in the world and seeing things be different than they are. But really my invitation is to think about whether dismantling the system is the truest, the thing that you need to be doing. Right? What's the other things that you could be doing where you see visible, where you see yourself, you have more agency wherever you are in your classroom, or, change that, make that different than everything else in the school, in the district, so that those kids who are sitting in your class every day, they have something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything that you said. Like, I think so much about what it means to be Black, queer people in the arts. I'm just like, there's so much that I just want to do for myself. Like, I honestly am just like, and I'm relentless. I don't care. Like, I really, really want to see some things happen. And I know I have the capacity to do them. Am I trying to crash the system? No, because I need the resources to do the shit I need to do. But there are absolutely ways to create safe haven for others, to consistently be thinking about ways to trailblaze that make it a safer environment for those who are outside you or coming behind you. But I'm just like, I just want to wail and flail my little arms and do my thing. Like, I'm trying to twirl, honey. I'm not trying to break nothing. Like, I want all of the glamour and all of the goodness that there is. And I want to know where that glamour and goodness comes from, because I might have time to break the system later, but I want to know. Like, I tell people all the time, the Met is the longest place I've ever worked. And the first year I spent there, I didn't disrupt a single thing, because I knew I needed to know how it worked first. I knew I needed to make, and not to lie to myself and not defend myself or not to create safe space or whatever. But I was like, y'all been doing this for 150 years. I just want to know how. Because I gotta say my ass to the studio museum. You know, like, I just want to know how you guys did that.
You can swim against the current, or you can do your thing.
Well, we are at time. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question, and deep apologies if your question wasn't answered fully. But the good news is this is just the beginning of the Face2Face conference. We want to turn it back over to our host, who will close us out. But thank you all for this wonderful discussion and for the Q&A afterwards. And thank you, Darrell, for being my co-MC.
Thank you, Kimberly Drew. I love you.
I love you too, Haley. And Toya, I'm so happy to meet you through this, and Darrell as well. This is just such a beautiful way to spend the afternoon.
Yes. Such an honor. Thank you both. Yay!
Thanks all for joining us this afternoon. A huge thank you to Suhaly and Kimberly, as well as to our artists from Urban Word NYC, Sergio and Nathaniel. Of course, a special shout out to our Roundtable board member, committee member, Toya Lillard, and our conference co-chair, Darrell Cooper. In a moment, we're gonna launch a poll. If you wouldn't mind, it will be 3 questions, just helping fill it out so that we can get feedback from our community. This really helps us look at to hear from you and figure out ways that we can continue to offer programming and improve upon that. As was mentioned during this session, the Black Women's Wellness Retreat application is now live, and we are accepting applications through Wednesday, April 14th at 11:59 p.m. If you have somebody in your life that is a Black female elder working in the arts and cultural sector, arts education, please nominate them as well. We are holding 5 spots for Black female elders in the field. And I know either Kinsey or Megan will paste those links in the chat on how to apply or how to nominate somebody. All of this is in line with our Rebuild, Reconcile, and Reimagine campaign, a list of demands for centering Black women's leadership in arts education. We're going to be actually releasing some exciting resources around that list of demands, so stay tuned for more on that front. And lastly, I hope you'll join us on Monday. We're going to be kicking off our sessions at Face2Face. Starting on Monday at 10 a.m., we have Hip Hop Connects, What's Real, What's Relevant. And then following at 4 p.m., there's Community Grief Ritual. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll leave the Zoom open for another minute or so, and then we'll close things out in case folks want to answer the poll or leave a message in the chat. But again, thanks so much for joining us at the Roundtable. We can't wait to see you soon.